2 balls and a strike to count on Taylor. Reyes fires, swinging a drive, deep left field. This is way back. Welcome on, Chris Taylor.
What's up, everyone? Welcome into DodgerHeads Live, presented by DodgerBlue.com. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined tonight by Matthew Moreno. Matt, I'm going to be honest. This loss was really, really bad. We're going to get into it. The trade deadline was really, really good. I don't know how to feel right now, Matt.
Yeah, like there was, I know, a lot of excitement. I was watching, I was running the website, so I wasn't able to be on the live show with you guys, but I had it playing. I could see the chat. Everybody was excited as we got close to the buzzer, and then the Dodgers made their big move. Come out against the Padres 5-0 right off the bat. Things are going well, and then it's just been downhill since then. And I mean, yeah, it's an unfortunate ending to what was, I think, an optimistic and exciting day. And now, I do see a lot of frustration in the chat, and we're going to certainly get into everything.
Yeah, lots to get to. We're going to talk the game, of course. We'll talk about the trade deadline. We'll talk about a report from Ken Rosenthal about Jack Flaherty's back. We'll talk about kind of how the roster fits in, and then we'll get to a question and answer. It might be a little bit of a shorter show. As many of you know, we had an hour and a half live show a few hours ago. So lots of me. I see people saying my voice still works. It's true. I've been sick, actually. So anything you hear in my voice is not from talking too much. It's from being sick. But we're here, and let's talk about this game, Matt. The Dodgers, as you mentioned, they kind of ride the momentum of the trade deadline. It felt like 5 runs in the first, capped off by a 2-run, 2-out single from Andy Pages, and then a 2-run home run from Cavan Biggio. It's 5-0. Tyler Glass now on the mound. And at that moment, I mean, that might be the peak. That might have been the peak. They had just traded for Jack Flaherty. They come out hot against the Padres in San Diego. And it felt like it was just going to be a smooth ride. And yet, as Dodger fans, we should have known better, Matt, that it's never as smooth as it seems.
Yeah, I mean, especially down in San Diego, I text Blake as the Padres were coming back and they tied it. And I said, you're getting the full Petco Park experience, because I've been down there several times where a game looks to be in hand. You think things are going fine, and all of a sudden the Padres just start stringing together a rally. Machado gets up to play the Dodgers. I think there's no denying that, whether it's at Dodger Stadium or in San Diego. Yeah. And that's just, kind of what we saw. I know, we'll get into the bullpen certainly, struggling.
This is one of those games where there's plenty of people with blood on their hands, I would say. The Dodgers take the 5-0 lead. Machado hits a home run in the second to make it 5-1. Profar and Cronenworth, a pair of RBI hits in the third to make it 5-3. I believe that was kind of a 2-out rally in the third. So Glasnow can't get out of that inning, ends up giving up 3 runs. And then Blake Treinen comes in for the 9th. We know the Dodgers' pen's been a mess. Treinen's been bad. Phillips has been bad. Vesia has been bad. Hudson blew the save the other night. So it's kind of like, who do you go to here? They already burned Banda, who's been awesome. Brent Honeywell apparently was not in the pecking order because Evan Phillips was warming after Vesia. But Machado, first pitch he sees from Treinen is a home run, 414 feet. And then a couple batters later, it's Jackson Merrill hitting a home run to tie it. And at that point, Matt, was there any doubt in anybody's mind that the Dodgers were losing this? Like there was a 0% chance the Dodgers were going to win this in 10 with the bullpen that they had, and just knowing where the Padres, who they had left to throw, and just kind of the momentum in San Diego at that moment.
Yeah, unfortunately, that was, even for me, like when Machado hit his home run, I thought, oh man, like if anybody gets on, the Padres are going to end this in 9 innings. And that didn't happen.
Think we were getting out of 9.
That didn't happen, but they certainly sent it into extras. And yes, to your point, to your question, at that point, I did believe that, short of the Dodgers, which they did do one time several years back before this dumb automatic runner rule was implemented, the Dodgers exploded for like 6 or 7 runs in San Diego in extra innings. Like I think they batted around. The Padres ran out of pitchers. I think we might have done a post-game show after it, because we were saying it was Chase Tingler's days, and we were saying he like had to forfeit a spot in the lineup. Like it got wacky and crazy. Yeah. And I remember us saying, had Dave Roberts done that, like people would be livid. So short of the Dodgers doing something like that, I was, fully expecting that once it went in extra innings, it was only a matter of time until the Padres pulled out that win.
I mean, where are you at? Let's talk bullpen, because we're here. It's one thing to look at sort of the middle back end, like front end, I should say, guys, the 7th, 6th, 7th, 8th inning type guys, and have issues. But as I look at the Dodgers bullpen right now, Matt, it's Phillips, it's Vesia, it's Trinan, it's Hudson. Those are literally the 4 guys that if you asked me a month ago, I would have said, of course I trust those guys will figure out the rest around it. All 4 of them are a mess right now. Phillips, I think they said, is like 9 or 11 or 9 runs in his last 3 and 2/3 innings. Trinan, of course, has now blown a pair. Hudson blew his last save, I believe. Vesia, this one doesn't technically count as a run, but this would have been runs in 4 straight for Vesia. So, I mean, the trade deadline is passed. This is the group they have. Obviously, they can get creative with some of the starting pitchers, and I've joked about Bobby Miller and Walker Buehler learning how to throw out of the bullpen. Justin Robleski, I think, could end up there eventually as the season begins to wind down. But the concern for the Dodgers right now is none of these guys, all of these guys decided to suck at the exact same time. Is this something that you look at and say, hey, you know what? Life is a reliever up and down. They've absolutely taxed these guys. Give them a couple weeks to recover. And I feel like I can trust these guys again come end of September, beginning of October. Or are there real cracks in the foundation when it comes to Phillips, Hudson, Trinan, and Vesia?
Yes. I'll answer your question the way Dave Roberts did one of his pregame. He said all of the above. Yeah. I think I saw somebody commenting about Vesia's velocity. That's the most concerning with him is something going on? Is it just fatigue? And if it is, then, it's just a matter of getting the rotation into a better spot and getting, more length from the starters. That would certainly help. I did answer your question sort of in jest, but I do think that it is a little bit of both. And if the starters were consistently pitching deeper into games, we saw it earlier. The bullpen started to struggle. The starters weren't going deep. The starters began providing more length. The bullpen sort of stabilized. Yeah. So, there is a little bit of hand in hand. Tonight, honestly, I think boils down to, and it's going to sound funny because he didn't even pitch, but it boils down to Evan Phillips.
Yeah.
Because if Evan Phillips was the Evan Phillips we have seen before his recent struggles, he's closing this game out and probably not giving up 2 home runs the way Trinan did. So,
or even coming into the game, like Roberts could have gone to Phillips. I mean, it could be on Roberts if Phillips wasn't ready, but for Solano, he could have gone to Phillips and had that weird interaction that cost him a pitch clock violation. It felt like he was stalling, but then he didn't end up going to Phillips when he could have. Vesia had already faced 3 batters at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I think also though, Phillips is, I don't want to say he's a shell of himself, but he's not his own, so it may not have mattered anyway.
Yeah, I agree.
I more so for me, it's most glaring in the 9th inning, because if Phillips was what we saw the first couple months of the season, we're probably having a different post-game show right now. And that's I think that would ease some of the concern, the bullpen concern that is out there that we're seeing, in the chat as everybody's going crazy and even, on social media during the game. But yeah, I think if the Dodgers can get long way of me saying if the Dodgers can get better length from their starters, it'll help the bullpen just overall, because we saw it earlier. And I do think, is Blake Trinan going to be as lights out as he was when he first came back? Probably not. That was impressive, and that was unexpected considering what he was returning from. But I do think he still is a very good relief pitcher. I do think Daniel Hudson is capable of getting big outs for the Dodgers as well. So it's just a matter of, getting back to that level again.
Well, and keep in mind, 2 weeks ago, we felt very different about the group that we're looking at. And so maybe there needs to be a little bit of patience and say, hey, if we felt good about these guys for 3.5 or 4 months, then maybe we shouldn't let 2 weeks completely change our perception of them, especially when there are extenuating circumstances like the fact that they've been completely overworked, guys are injured, and that kind of thing, that there might be some real reasons as to why that is. Let's get to a couple super chats here. Risen Indeed Inc. Carrillo, thank you very much for the super chat. If you did mean to leave a question in there, go ahead and throw it in the chat. We'll do our best to find it. You don't need to do another super chat, but we'd love to get to a question if you've got it. I like this one. Ozzy says, I'm going Jeff Spiegel and saying Grove doesn't sound too bad right now, and he's pitching great in Oklahoma City. I did tweet out, Matt, Gratterall, Brazier, and Grove all appeared in Oklahoma City. I accidentally left out that Brusdar Gratterall, I believe his line was 2/3 of an inning, 5 hits, a walk, and 4 runs. So that wasn't great, but Michael Grove, 4 scoreless appearances for Oklahoma City. Ryan Brazier, I believe, made his 2nd or his 3rd appearance in part of his rehab stint. So there are some reinforcements potentially coming. I could see a Blake Trinan, Evan Phillips, Daniel Hudson, Alex Vesia, some combination of 2 of those guys getting a 15-day break on the injured list while Grove comes up and eats some innings, while Brusdar Graterol begins to make his way back. So I do think if there is a silver lining here, Matt, there does feel like there are some reinforcements on the way that at the very least can just take the load off of the guys who have probably been bearing the brunt of it.
Yeah, that's certainly going to help, especially, I mean, all those relief pitchers. Graterol hasn't pitched in a game for the Dodgers at all this season, so he, in theory, is certainly pretty fresh.
Yeah.
Grove has been out for a while. Brazier's been out for a while, so it's not even just that you're getting back expected contributors, but these guys, they haven't really thrown it all this season, and so they should be fresh for kind of the home stretch of the regular season and hopefully into a deep playoff run.
Yeah, absolutely. Laura, speaking of playoff runs, says if this keeps up, we're going to get caught up in the wild card rat race. I believe after tonight, the Dodgers' lead in the division is down to just 5.5 games. Their lead over the wild card is 6 games because Arizona is currently on the outside looking in the wild card race. So 5.5, 6 games. Look, the Dodgers are 7-4 since the All-Star break, so this feels a little unfair. But as it relates to the Padres and how well they are playing, they're now 8-3 in their last 11. Are you starting to feel any sort of nerves, Matt, about the divisional race and about the wild card?
Not too much, and I have seen some of this starting to go around. The Padres got to, I was either 5 or 5.5 games a few days ago, and I saw people saying, "Hey, that could end up, they could set up this series to be, pretty significant." But then they lost and the Dodgers won, and so that kind of created a little bit more separation. I mean, think about I know that a couple of weeks ago it was 7 games, 8 games, whatever it may have been, and now it's down to 5.5. Like that certainly looks worse than where the Dodgers were. But all things being equal, if you look at a team that's 5.5 games up on another team in the standings, like you're not necessarily saying they're like breathing down their backs, right? Yeah. Like that's I want to say comfortable distance, but there is a little bit of room there. So I'm not fully worried about that yet. And again, I some of it is I'm hanging my hat on the Dodgers are going to get, like, Mookie Betts is going to come back. Jack Flaherty, and I know we're going to get into some interesting developments with him potentially. He's going to join the rotation. Like things should kind of stabilize a little bit until, then maybe further down the line, Yamamoto is ready, Graterol is ready, maybe Muncy and stuff like that.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. Jonathan, if we could just get length from our starters, and if I could just be 3 inches taller with $1 million more in my bank account. What was that song? I wish I was a baller. I wish I was a little bit taller. That's what we got going on. Look, when you're starting all the rookies, I think it's a fair point that getting more length from your starters is not necessarily always going to be possible. And so the Dodgers are going to have to figure it out. I think it relates to this next one from Pandemic 7. Again, thank you to Laura, Ozzy, Jonathan, Risen Indeed, and Pandemic here for the super chats. He says Mookie, Max, and Freddie are not playing and the regular season is meaningless. Everybody get a grip. Question, though, has Dave mismanaged the bullpen with overuse? And I think it's a reasonable question. Like, why are all these guys tired? But the piece that you have to remember is there are only so many guys out there in the bullpen. Like, if the Dodgers need to go get 4 innings from their bullpen 3 games in a row, they only have 8 guys out there. And if you're doing a 6-man rotation, it's 7 guys out there. And so you can say, hey, we're not going to use Phillips back to back. And they've done a pretty good job of that kind of a thing. But eventually you run out of other arms. Eventually there's only 4 guys available for a night. And if you need 4 innings, you need 4 innings. And so I don't know. I sound like a Dave Roberts apologist, but I don't feel like he's mismanaged this as much as to the point you were making earlier. When the starters can't give you length or be consistent, as the Dodgers have struggled to find, especially of late, there's only so many guys out there you can call and hand the ball to.
Yeah, I think, the mismanaged stuff, for me, it would the most egregious things that kind of stick out recently are and they weren't even necessarily egregious, that's too strong, but taking out Robleski and River Ryan, basically the same situations, right, in back-to-back games. Like, in both those cases, I probably would have let them try to get the final out in the 6th inning. And so had he done that, maybe they still lose the games anyway. Maybe not. Maybe he saves, a relief pitcher here and there. But like his hands are also kind of tied with stuff. I mean, if your starter is giving you 4 1/3, 4 2/3 in some case. And I mean, look, tonight Glasnow gave enough length and the bullpen should have been able to uphold the lead. They did up until, Blake Trinan is just going through it right now, unfortunately. So I did comment earlier as we set the stream up in the chat room open, people were upset saying, Dave Roberts, this and that. And I said, well, he didn't give up the 2 home runs in the 9th inning. Like, exactly. And then we got called an apologist and we're just worried about our credentials, which is not the case. I just think, like, look, I was on record saying that I felt the Dodgers should have made a change with Dave Roberts after they were swept out of the NLDS last year. So I'm not sitting here trying to defend him just for the sake of our outlets access.
Yeah.
It's just it's what I believe.
Yeah, and I think the point you make about pulling the two starters early, again, keep in mind that the hand that Dave Roberts has been dealt is that, like River Ryan, it was the deepest into a game he's ever pitched in his professional career. And so he's not only being handed starters, but he's handed starters who it's like, hey, this guy can only give us 80 to 90 pitches or whatever. And so he's got kid gloves on the relievers, and you can't have kid gloves on the relievers, or excuse me, the starters and also the relievers. I think he's in a tough spot. And again, it's not his fault. He went, like, who did you want him to go to tonight, right? Like, anybody who's mad, he went to Trinan. Then he went to Vesia, and Vesia gave it up. And then Phillips was warming, but he's been the worst. Like, if somebody wants to say Honeywell, like, I mean, I guess more power to you. But, I think he's got limited options out there right now.
Yeah, the Honeywell is the popular name that I did see, and I get it. He's pitched well in the opportunity. He did just convert a save. I think it was against the Astros, right? And here we do have the super chat from Tommy. Yeah. He did a second one asking.
Okay.
You mentioned Tommy, we appreciate you doing 2 back-to-back. You didn't have to necessarily do that, but thank you. So he's asking why not use Honeywell in the 9th. Honeywell, just matter of factly speaking, he hasn't cracked that role yet. Sure, he can be high leverage, and he was in a safe situation I'm pretty sure it was against the Astros on Sunday, because the Dodgers had exhausted their bullpen. I think Dave Roberts, heading into that game, he said they had like 3 relief pitchers available, and they used all 3 of them. Honeywell was a 4-run
game. He came in, by the time he came in, it was 4 runs.
That's right. But Honeywell was one of the few relief pitchers available that day, so that's why he got the 9th inning.
Yeah.
And credit to him for, not losing the game. And he did pitch well, and he has fared much better than I expected when they claimed him off of waivers. But he's just not in a close, a safe situation. Honeywell is not going to, for better or worse, he's not going to be elevated past Evan Phillips, Blake Treinen, and Daniel Hudson right now, all things being equal. If everybody's available, even Joe Kelly, if Joe Kelly was available tonight, he would have pitched.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. And look, I understand you look at Honeywell. He's at 9 2/3 innings with the Dodgers, 4 hits, no runs, no walks, and 7 strikeouts. So you see those numbers, and I understand the argument. And I'm not even saying you're wrong. Like, I think obviously hindsight is 20/20, and I think this is one of the hardest things for a manager is, at what point do you stop trusting the guys that you've been trained to always trust? Like, hey, Trinan's had a bad couple of outings, but 2 weeks ago, he was one of the best relievers in baseball. Evan Phillips, same thing. And so at some point you cross that threshold. For me, Matt, I've crossed the threshold. Like, we're past it now. Like, I trust Banda more than I trust Trinan. Vesia, I think, got dealt kind of a raw hand tonight, at least. Obviously, he hasn't been good of late, so it's not like he's earned the trust. But seeing Trinan just get absolutely shelled now twice in a row, to me, it's like, yeah, I think he's moved down in the pecking order. Either give him a break or, move some other guys around and put him in lower leverage situations would be my advice.
I think that's fair. I think also with Trinan, it could be something maybe that's just sequencing, because now he's been hurt back-to-back appearances on the first pitch. And so our opponent's picking up something, and that's on Trinan. That's also on the Dodgers scouting and pitching coaches as well.
Totally. JP Jazzman with another super chat here. Dodgers October baseball ... Maybe. Yeah, I mean, I get it. I'm not arguing with anybody tonight. We appreciate the super chat. It makes a bad night a little bit better. Richard here. Padres get emotional when they play the Dodgers. It's life and death. It's blood that runs through their veins. Don't want to see them in the NLDS. I agree with everything here. And I'm not saying it's like the best thing in the world that they live and die by playing the Dodgers in San Diego, but clearly it works for them. Clearly they're winning these games. And I definitely don't want to see this team in the NLDS for 100 different reasons. But the fact that the Dodgers have struggled against them is definitely one of them. Gabriel, with the super chat as well. Machado hates the Dodgers, always shows up. 2 home runs, 2 incredible defensive plays. He's not my favorite guy in Major League Baseball, but it seems like every time we play, Matt, this guy's hitting absolute tanks.
Yeah, I think he enjoys playing the Dodgers. And I mean, I think, Machado, when it's a marquee opponent, I think he rises to the level of competition, so to speak. When it's the Dodgers, I think it maybe ratchets it up even an extra notch or two. But yeah, I mean, there's nothing you can really say. Like you said, he made a couple nice plays. He hit 2 home runs. You just kind of have to tip your cap.
Yeah, exactly. Or make better pitches. One of the two.
Yeah.
Let's shift gears here a little bit from one potentially depressing topic to another potentially depressing topic, which is Jack Flaherty health concerns. As I'm assuming nobody that's watching our show after the loss at 10 p.m. Is unaware, the Dodgers made the biggest move of the trade deadline, acquiring Jack Flaherty from the Detroit Tigers. Theyron Lorenzo, who's one of the Dodgers' top prospects, number 3 on some lists, as low as number 8, I believe I've seen on other lists, as well as Trey Sweeney, who is kind of closer to the 20-ish range from a prospect perspective, sent to Detroit in exchange for Flaherty, who, again, is the best starting pitcher that was moved at the deadline this year. As the game had started, there was a report that came out from Ken Rosenthal that, let's just say I found interesting, Matt. This is what Rosenthal had to say. The title was Yankees backed out of Jack Flaherty trade because of medical concerns, according to sources. He said sources briefed on the discussions. The Yankees backed out of a preliminary trade agreement with the Detroit Tigers for Flaherty after reviewing his medical records. They went on to say that he's had back issues. The issue with Flaherty, his lower back, forced him to miss a start at the beginning of July and receive 2 injections in a span of 3 weeks. Since returning, he has made 3 starts, producing a combined 1.53 ERA in 17 2/3 innings. For the season, he has a 2.95 ERA. The Tigers went on to say, this is all nonsense. We can't comment on medical stuff, but he would have been starting for us had he made his next turn. Nobody can comment because it's a medical thing. There's lots of ways to interpret this. Option A is it's legit. It's real. Flaherty's back was really concerning to the Yankees, and the Dodgers should be concerned. Option 2 is the Yankees were concerned. The Dodgers did their due diligence. They're not concerned. Option C is the Tigers and or Yankees decided to put this report out as if to say, yeah, we know we didn't get the best return, i.e. the Tigers or the Yankees. This is why we didn't go make the big move that all our fans were hoping we'd make, is because of insert random, potentially made up reason here. So what do you make of this story from Ken Rosenthal and kind of the fallout from it?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some reason to have pause. Maybe not be concerned, but to have a little bit of pause. Flaherty clearly did deal with some sort of back trouble. He missed 2 starts this season. He did there's no refuting even before this report. Like I went and looked up, like he did acknowledge that he got shots or injections. He was vague from what I read about what they were. I'm assuming probably a cortisone or, I mean, it could be an epidural just based on hearing what players, like when we've covered the Dodgers in similar situations. I think that's a possibility. I think the other possibility is that, yes, the Tigers and or Yankees are trying to justify why, in the Yankees case, they didn't trade for him, and in the Tigers case, why they only got Lorenzo and
why
Trey
they got
Sweeney.
less for Flaherty than Kikuchi or Scott netted.
Yeah, and I mean, it does. When the trade happened, and I saw that was all the Dodgers sent, and I know that you got, like, we all agreed, like, man, like, that's a steal. Like, that's a bargain considering how everything had been going. So then, like, on one hand, this sort of would explain that, like, if there is a little bit, that's why I think, maybe there was a little bit of back trouble. Maybe it's something he has to sort of manage and take care of. Maybe he needs an extra day of rest between starts, stuff like maybe it's something minor like that.
Yeah.
What is concerning, just from the Dodgers standpoint, is the team has, a bunch of injured pitchers to begin with. And so now your big sort of the impact guy that you added possibly falling into that category is a little alarming.
Yeah.
But as of now, like, I'm not, Dave Roberts, when he was discussing, we have the video up on our YouTube channel, so definitely you guys can check that out once we're done here. He wasn't asked directly about Flaherty's health, but he did, speak optimistically about it and just his season in general. So, I mean, just take it day by day at this point, because there's too many ways that this, like, why was this information leaked? Who leaked it? Like, there are a lot of different factors. And so just kind of have to wait and see, unfortunately.
Yeah, and there's a Tigers beat reporter as well who kind of said that the Tigers GM overplayed his hand on Flaherty and was asking for so much with 2 hours before the deadline that by the time they actually got close to it, he had kind of scared enough people off, presumably, or had so little time to actually make real negotiations that this is what he ended up with. And I think the reality is we don't know. I think, to your point, he definitely had a back injury and he definitely got these shots. Now, I just said he has a 1.5 ERA in the 3 starts since, so that's encouraging. He's gone almost 6 innings in all of those. The flip side is I think there's real there's narratives that you could build that make sense if it's, hey, the Tigers started getting crushed for how little they got, and so they leaked this, or the Yankees started getting crushed for not matching this offer or beating it, so they leaked this. There's lots of ways that this could go, and we're never going to really know the answer to it, but it's just something to keep an eye on. If Jack Flaherty makes every start for the Dodgers for the rest of the season, and then he's a free agent and has no back issues, then this is going to be a farce, and we're not going to have to worry about it. If 2 starts from now, he exits early, gripping his lower back, then we're going to come back to this and say, holy crap, maybe the Dodgers made a mistake. I think I default, Matt, and we had this conversation about Tommy Edman and his wrist/ankle as well. I think I just default to trusting the people who have way more information than I do, i.e. the Dodgers. Like, the Dodgers don't seem like a reckless organization in the sense that they would just go out and make a big move for a guy like Flaherty, because even though it was quote unquote cheap, it wasn't free. Like, if this guy was only going to make 3 or 4 starts the rest of the season and be in jeopardy for the playoffs, they're not giving up Lorenzo for him. And so I imagine they looked at the medicals. They have medical professionals that looked at the medicals that understand the back injury and said, hey, it's a worthwhile risk to make. In the same case with Edman's ankle and Edman's wrist. Like, I just choose to believe that they know more information and are more invested in the outcome of this than people like you and like me. And, maybe that makes me crazy. Maybe I shouldn't trust them as much as I do, but that's just kind of where I land on this.
Yeah, I think that's fair and reasonable. And, I could definitely see a scenario where the Dodgers felt like the cost, the risk was worth it with Flaherty. I mean, it doesn't, if it is just some back trouble that he can manage, I mean, hey, if anything, the Dodgers have experience with that with Kershaw and the different times he's sort of had his back flare up on him. I think for me, what sort of changes a little bit, because I did feel it anyway. Like, I expressed it to you and Greg, and, even a week ago, 10 days ago, like, I felt like the Dodgers probably needed to trade for multiple like one, impact, like a Flaherty type, and another maybe complementary sort of depth mid-tier. I mean, the problem was obviously the prices ended up being crazy, so I guess it wouldn't have been worth it at that point. But my concern, like, I just personally harbor a little bit more concern now, because again, like, this pitcher you just added to your rotation possibly has, some back trouble that, even if it is relatively minor, if he misses a couple starts, like, it could just put a further strain on the pitching staff.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's going to be a lot of pressure that's now put on Justin Robleski, River Ryan, Landon Knack, and guys like that, because this is the group. Like, this is the group that's going to get you across the finish line. And typically at this point, there's maybe a guy or two down in AAA that say, hey, worst case scenario, maybe this guy comes up and makes a couple starts. Those guys are all up or have already been up. There's not another starter at the AAA level that they could really just go tap and say, like, oh, you never heard about this guy, or he hasn't made his major league debut, but don't worry, he's going to be good. Like, those guys have all already been called up. That was, I was talking to Rob Hill 6 weeks ago, and I was like, hey, this might be crazy, but do you think we see River Ryan this year? Like, we saw him middle of July. He ended up being called up. And really the expectation wasn't that he was going to be up until maybe the very end of this year, if not next. Robleski wasn't even on the radar. And both those guys, again, middle of July, are up. So I think the Dodgers have, from a quantity perspective, seemingly enough guys who can eat innings and get them to the end. It's not like they're going to be patching bullpen games together when you factor in, worst case scenario, Bobby Miller could go eat you some innings. It's not going to be pretty based on what we've seen, but they've got guys like that they can throw out there and get them to the finish line. I think the question you're asking, which is a fair one, is what's it going to look like once you cross it? Once you get to the playoffs, is Yamamoto going to be upright? Is Flaherty going to be upright? Is Gavin Stone going to have anything left in the tank? Is River Ryan and Justin Robleski going to have anything left in the tank? I think these are all fair questions and ones that the Dodgers are going to have to answer. I do want to get your thoughts. I mean, it's impossible to separate it from the conversation we just had, but obviously the huge news of the day is that the Dodgers went out and traded for Jack Flaherty. And I still think the Dodgers got an incredible deal in the context of the cost of all these other players. And I've got Padres fans in my mentions telling me that all the guys they traded away all suck, which is amazing because the prospect experts, none of them believe that, but the Padres apparently do. And maybe they're right. Who knows? But I felt like Tanner Scott was a massive overpay. Kikuchi was a massive overpay. Pretty much every pitcher that went out there felt like 125 cents on the dollar. And then I see the Dodgers costs, and I'm like, wait, we didn't have to give up rushing? Like, now, having read a little bit more in the last few hours, I think Lorenzo has climbed up higher up lists than I expected. I figured he was kind of in that 8-ish range. Justin Lorber has him 4th at the midseason, kind of right outside the top 3, and said, hey, that 4 to 8 group is probably a flexible group. You could move some guys around. So I do think the cost is maybe a little higher than I was imagining on the live show. That said, I still like the cost a lot given the context. They needed to go out and make this move. They did it. And if, which maybe feels like a huge if now, if Jack Flaherty doesn't have a back issue, this to me feels like an absolute home run.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, look, even if he misses 1 or 2 starts to finish a season because his back, like I'm not gonna sit here and say,
is he available in the NLDS? That's the biggest question.
Yes, exactly. And so I mean, it was a great trade for the Dodgers, and it basically saved their trade deadline, in my opinion. Like the moves that they made on Monday were great and helped, sort of the fringes of the roster. And I know the big buzzword is they raised the floor, which Dave Roberts said today to media, and he said it at the trade deadline last year too, that those trades raised the floor, and coincidentally Ahmed Rosario was one of them. So it's just kind of funny to see that connection again. But yeah, adding Flaherty was definitely significant. Kevin Kiermaier, I know Blake is really excited about him. I think fine, like he can help shore up your defense in center field, but that's going to be pretty much it.
Yeah.
I thought that's
big defense guy all of a sudden, Blake, huh?
Yeah. I thought that's what Tommy Edman was here for, but hey, the Dodgers have 2 guys who could sort of do it now. But yeah, more than anything, like I was a little surprised. I am still a little Lorenzo, like the odds of the Dodgers like really regretting trading him aren't high, right? Like you already have Will Smith that we all view, that baseball, the industry views as one of the best catchers that there is. And he's signed, spoiler alert, to a long-term contract extension. So it's not like he's going anywhere.
And he ain't playing DH anytime soon.
Right. So what surprised me a little bit though is that maybe they didn't just try to use Dalton Rushing, because I think he is older than Lorenzo, right?
Yeah, Lorenzo's 21 and in single A.
So Rushing is further along, and you don't have a roster spot for him.
Yeah.
So obviously this is looking way ahead. Like, are they saving him for something in the offseason to move at that point? Maybe just next year. Like that was just the sort of, interesting thing that I found with it. But again, like we've seen this from Andrew Friedman. Like I know that there is the perception that he won't trade prospects, this and that. He does. And when he does it, it's always from a position of depth. You mentioned it. Trey Sweeney has been, by most evaluators, has probably been passed up in the organization by multiple shortstop prospects that the Dodgers have. And so, losing him probably isn't going to necessarily cost them or hurt them too much down the line. So, however, it's sort of short of Flaherty, like needing to finish the season on the 60-day IL, like it was a big win for the Dodgers.
Yeah, and I see somebody in the chat saying trade Cartaya. I mean, Cartaya and Rushing are kind of the two paths that a guy like Lorenzo could go. Like when Cartaya was Lorenzo's age, he was a much higher regarded prospect than Lorenzo is even today. He was destined for the top 5 in Major League Baseball. Keith Law said he might be the best prospect in baseball someday. Obviously, things have not developed the way you want, and that's the risk with 20, 21-year-old catchers. And so Lorenzo could go down that road, or he could end up being awesome, and that's the risk you take on any of these trades. To your point with Dalton Rushing, it does feel like, hey, what's the point? Like, what position is he going to play? We can't wait. He's not, him and Will Smith can't wait until Freddie Freeman is gone, because that's still a few years away. Unless Dalton Rushing's going to try and learn left field, which doesn't sound likely. We've seen him try it before. Who knows? But obviously, if you can get away with trading a lesser prospect, then you worry about what to do with the bigger prospect down the road, and maybe that's the Dodgers' plan. But overall, a good day. They do add Kiermaier. Blake and I were going back and forth on what his plan is. He's elite defensively. There's no disagreeing about that. He's the best defensive center fielder in baseball still at age 34 by all accounts, if not the best, one of the best, I should say. The problem is offensively. I mean, he's James Outman and him have the same weighted runs created plus this season, to give you context. It's way worse than Kike Hernandez's. It's way worse than Kevin Biggio's. So we know the defense is good. He's basically James Outman, but a little bit better defensively, or a lot better defensively, however you want to grade it. Outman's very good, but so I don't know. I'm skeptical that Kiermaier is like a long-term fit or answer here. It's possible they just were like, hey, Yarbrough, this is what we can get for Yarbrough, and Yarbrough's DFA'd, and we could use a center fielder more than Yarbrough. So let's just swap some pieces out and see what happens. But it's another piece. Obviously, Rosario's on his way in. And of course, Tommy Edman, who was in the dugout, but is still kind of needs some minor league work, some injury rehab. It sounds like he's still a week or two away. So the interesting piece on the other side of this briefly, and then we'll get to some questions here, Matt, is just the fact that the Dodgers have a lot of position players now. And you start doing the math on if everyone's healthy, which I know, chats, I'll spare you having to correct me on nobody's ever going to be fully healthy. But Mookie Betts expected back soon. Tommy Edman expected back soon. Obviously, Chris Taylor, Miguel Rojas, a little bit more unclear. Max Muncy, a little bit more unclear. But none of those guys have been crossed out and saying, oh, they're done for the year. And there are some easy candidates. I think, sending James Outman down to AAA is an easy choice here. I think there's some other guys in that group. Kike Hernandez, we've long said, like, is he really going to stick around or might he be DFA'd? Kevin Biggio now has a couple home runs, so who knows with him, but he could be DFA'd. But even then, you're still going to have too many players, even if you send all those guys down. Then does Pages get sent down? Maybe. Then you've got Jason Hayward, figure out what to do with him. Chris Taylor, if he comes back. And so they've got about 18 guys for 13 spots. And so if and when people start to get healthy, I do think the Dodgers are going to have some interesting choices to make as it relates to Kiermaier and some of these other guys on the fringes.
Yeah, and I see people questioning and saying Muncy's not coming back. I'm inclined to. I've been in that camp the past couple of weeks, but Brandon Gomes did reiterate today. We do have that. He did a little press conference with media through Zoom, and that video's up on our YouTube channel as well. So definitely check it out. He did say that he's confident, and the Dodgers are planning on having Muncy now in the lineup. Now it could just be obviously GM speak, and not wanting to say he's done for the year, and hey, we'll be fine. But that's been a common refrain from everybody, even from Dave Roberts. So the Dodgers seem to be convinced that Max Muncy's going to be playing again this year. But if he is, and yes, like you just kind of quickly ran things down, and I'd have to get out a piece of paper and really write everybody's names and scratch and move and things like that to keep it all organized. But there is going to be, they've had a 40-man roster crunch the past couple of weeks, and they're going to have just a full-blown active roster crunch that they're going to be facing. And to your point, Kevin Biggio a couple weeks ago was an easy DFA candidate. People were running him out, saying, get him out of here. They don't need him anymore, especially once they signed Nick Ahmed. He's now put together some impressive. He went to Houston and found some Biggio family magic there, and is all of a sudden probably not somebody that you're going to necessarily just DFA at this point. Yeah. I think the 15-day injured list, or the 10-day injured list, for position players can potentially come into play at some point. I think the Dodgers will sort of try to leverage that and maybe see if, guys have been playing through some nagging, relatively minor injuries that we just haven't heard about yet. And, they'll need a little bit of break here and there. And really all it's about is getting to October. And then at that point, they'll set their roster based on the matchup and who they think are the best 26 players. I mean, let's remember a year ago, Ryan Yarbrough and Ahmed Rosario joined the team at the trade deadline, then were left off the NLDS roster. So, it could be their decisions that get made then that weren't necessarily you would have forecasted in the regular season.
Yeah, if you plug, if Muncy is back, if Betts is back, as Rojas is back, and you plug kind of Rosario and Edman into this group, here's you've got 2 spots left to decide between Chris Taylor, Andy Pages, Kevin Kiermaier, Kike Hernandez, Jason Hayward, James Outman, and Kevin Biggio. That's 7 guys competing for 2 spots on the roster. Now, playoff time is easy because you could just leave 5 of those guys off the roster. But if a month and a half from now, and we're in the middle of September, and all these guys are theoretically healthy, the Dodgers would never falsely put somebody on the injured list. But then you've got to make some decisions. Of those guys, Outman, Pages, they can both be optioned, no problem. So, but that still leaves you 5 guys for 2 spots, with 3 of those guys having to be DFA'd. So interesting decisions that the Dodgers are going to have to make. Of course, if it's the end of the season, who cares? Because, they're going to be gone at the end of the season anyways. And if you're DFAing them, then they're not going to be on the playoff roster. But that's kind of the scenario the Dodgers are staring down. And I would add, in the bullpen, you're going to be looking at the same kind of a thing. As bad as some of these guys have been, you don't really have much to do. Like if Evan Phillips is healthy, he's got to be in there. Trinan, Hudson, same thing. So you can put some IL stints, give the guys some breaks. But at the end of the day, there aren't a whole lot of guys with options to be sent down. Michael Grove, one of the guys we mentioned, is kind of the only one, I think, in the entire bullpen that's really got the ability to be sent down. Brewstar, I think, can be sent down.
He can, actually, but I don't think that they will. I mean, they've relied on him in high leverage spots. Like
it's true. It's true. I mean, I'm just saying it's an option. Come postseason time, he'd probably be back up. But That's where it goes. So let's get to some questions. Again, it's going to be a shorter show, so we got about 5 or 10 more minutes. While you are submitting some questions, I do want to give a shout out to our sponsor, So Rare MLB. If you have not joined yet, an incredible thing that's new. And by the way, they've got NFL and soccer and all sorts of other sports. We're sponsored by the MLB side, so we'll stick to talking about that. But it's fantasy baseball. You build a team, you collect your cards, and then throughout the game, you collect more and more cards. And each week, you're setting 2 lineups. Monday through Thursday, you set a lineup. It's a starter, it's a reliever, it's a corner infielder, a middle infielder, an outfielder, a hitter, and then a flex. And you set your lineup, you score points Monday through Thursday, you compete against everybody. And then if you score high enough, you get a good card or you get a bad card. If you score really, really well, you could get a card that actually is worth real money that you could then sell in their marketplace. There's opportunities to win cash. As we've mentioned before, we've done some pretty cool giveaways with them where we were giving away a pair of tickets to a baseball game of your choice. They had chances to win all-star game prizes and packages. So tons of stuff. If you have not already, I cannot encourage you enough. Please go check out So Rare MLB. Click the link in the description below. Sign up, create a free account, check it out. Let us know what you think. You could chat with me or with Blake or with Scott or with Matt. Get some tips maybe on how to construct your team or maybe mistakes we've made and say, hey, don't draft these guys because that were bad mistakes. So again, shout out to So Rare MLB. We appreciate the support and the sponsorship. They've been a great partner to us, and we're excited to keep partnering as the season goes along. Let's get to some questions here as promised. And Michael, an easy one right off the bat. Any regret the Dodgers didn't get another relief arm? You can't possibly say no here, right, Matt? Like we just watched the bullpen. You have to feel some form of regret, right?
No, I'm going to say no. Like I think I think that once the rotation really gets set and into place, that the bullpen will stabilize and Bruiser Graterol will be back. That'll help. So not a whole lot of great. And again, like I think we have to look at this like it's a nuanced conversation. And even like I said, I felt the Dodgers needed 2 starting pitchers at the deadline. But by that same token, I saw what the prices were. And yes, Jack Flaherty proved to be an exception, whether it's because he has a bad back or not. We'll find out in the weeks and months ahead. But trading for another relief pitcher would not have been easy. I mean, it was going to cost you significant prospects. And so at that point, like, is it really worth it? Or do you just count on some of the guys coming back from the IL? And like you said, some of the young pitchers that you could potentially put in there.
Yeah, and look, we talked about on our show, like I was giving Scott a hard time because he's like, hey, they need to be aggressive. They need to make moves like Tanner Scott. And then I was like, well, would you have given up that package? And he's like, no. It's like, well, you can't have it both ways. You can't want Tanner Scott and say no thank you to the package that was offered. And that's not what Scott was saying, but that's kind of the sense that I've gotten from other people is, well, I wish they would have gone and done this. And then you look at the market, like what was the deal out there that felt fair and reasonable? And again, I can't emphasize this enough. If they were to bring more guys in, then some of these guys who are struggling now, but who maybe you think you can trust a month from now, you just don't have roster spots for all of them. So they go and get Kopech. We'll see how that one plays out. But I'm actually with you. I don't feel any regret because I didn't want to pay those prices. I'll take my chances with Trinan and Hudson and Phillips and Vesia and all these guys at some point figuring it out. And worst case scenario, Anthony Band is closing out playoff games for us, Matt. And okay, maybe that is worst case scenario. But let's get to some other ones. Good vibrations, super chat here. Biden or Dave Roberts to manage in the playoffs? Thanks, guys. Come on. Dave Roberts, the highest winning percentage in Major League history, Matt. The people need to be reminded.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of Dave Roberts hate, but it's not always his fault. There are times where I think he has been pretty responsible for things, but it's not always his fault. And I think we need to keep that in mind.
If you've watched our show long enough, you know there is no show that is more quick to jump on a terrible 7th inning decision that Dave Roberts makes. But we're also fair in saying Blake Trinan hanging, a 2-seamer to the first pitch to Manny Machado. Not Dave Roberts' fault. He didn't call that pitch and tell him to throw it there. Michael wants to know, when is Freddie expected back? We don't know. Dave Roberts has said, hey, it's not really appropriate for me to ask that question. Obviously, he's going through some serious stuff with one of his kids. And so we don't know when Freddie's back. The Dodgers don't seem to know when Freddie's back. And you know what? That's okay, because it's a pretty serious situation. And I'm glad that they're getting a chance to get whatever time they need in that.
Yeah, definitely. The only update so far, the newest update, is that it won't be for the Padres series. Freddie is on the family emergency list. You can miss a maximum of 7 days on that, but the Dodgers are going to give him, and deservedly so, like however long he needs to be with his family. And so that could actually, may get to a point where they need to put him on the restricted list, which takes him off the 40-man temporarily. So that could, kind of help maneuver some things down the line, but that's all secondary. We do hope all is well with the Freeman family, because yes, it's an unfortunate and very serious situation they're dealing with.
BC wants to know if the Padres or the Diamondbacks played the Dodgers in the playoffs right now with Mookie and Freddie back, who you got?
I mean, I'll say Dodgers, but I'm not very confident in it. But I'm not necessarily going to pick one of the other teams. Although, look, you guys can go play back the tape from last October. I said a lot of disparaging things about the Diamondbacks that turned out to bite the Dodgers a little bit.
Hey, we all swing and we all miss sometimes. Ederico, is there a lack of motivation in the Dodgers dugout? The team seems to lack life. These kind of losses can't keep happening. Here's my thoughts on this, Matt. I agree. They've blown a couple 5-run leads. The bullpen's terrible. I get all that. They had won 7 of the 10 before this. Like, to say they lack motivation, that they lack life. They had literally won 7 out of 10 and we're on a roll. I know it hasn't always looked pretty, but I don't know. I just struggle where it's like, even now, they've won 7 of their last 11. That's a very good record. So to criticize the team because they lost tonight, I don't know. I don't know how to handle these things.
Yeah, I know you've always been on that side. I, in general, like, not necessarily looking at one game specifically, I think in general, the mindset and culture approach that the Dodgers have had of, hey, we're not going to get too high, we're not going to get too low during the regular season, has value and merit to that. Like, yes, you're not, it's a 3-0 loss in June. You're not going to be, throwing bags and kicking coolers and stuff. I get it, because there's still a lot more games to be played. I think where then we see it sort of backfire, if you will. And it is hard for tonight specifically, because the Dodgers are without a lot of their star players. If they have their regulars in the lineup, this game might be different. That being said, I do think there are instances where maybe because the Dodgers play at such, an even-keeled manner, that games like when you play a team like the Padres, who are a little bit more emotional, and other opponents who maybe get a little bit more rah-rah, that, you can see where it might sort of have them falling a little bit short. And
and again, I get the optics. Like, I think this is the eye test joke that you and I go back and forth again. That the eye test matters. Like, the way that it looked tonight, I understand. I'm just saying, what I wrestle with is, how do we balance that with the fact that they're actually have been winning more games than not and beating teams that are pretty decent. And so it's kind of like, my eyes are telling me one thing, the bigger picture record is telling me another thing. Both of these things, neither of these things is completely untrue. It's just a matter of, like, I'm not panicking, because until these two things align, until the record starts aligning with the eye test, I'm not going to be panicking. We've got a super chat here from Rod. Kopech hasn't pitched in a week. Why not tonight? Is he with the team? I haven't even tracked this.
He is there. Yeah, he's there. He was on the active roster, so he was available. I think it was probably just a matter of, like, new guy in town. Like, he was, emergency option type thing, not going to be part of their pitching plans tonight.
And look, with the group they threw out there, Banda was good. Trinan's clearly the guy you trust the most, and Vessi is clearly the guy they trust the second most. So it's kind of like, it's not like they got to the bottom of the bullpen and he was just sitting off to the side. They went with their high leverage guys. And, look, as much as we like the shiny new toy that we haven't seen yet, the ERA from him isn't pretty. So he doesn't deserve to be in these games yet. Let him get in the Mark Pryor pitching lab for a couple of weeks, and then we'll see what happens there. All right, everybody. That's going to do it for us tonight. Again, a lot of content coming. So apologies for the slightly shorter show tonight, but we're going to call it there. Bunch of stuff coming up on the channel. So please, if you haven't already, subscribe, ring the notification bell. We have an interview with Katie Wu from The Athletic talking about Tommy Edman, the person, the player, what the Dodgers are getting, where he's at health-wise, all that kind of stuff. That'll be posting in the morning, so it's really good stuff. She was super helpful and informative, somebody that knows him and kind of the deal around him pretty well. We've got an interview coming up later this week. We've got live shows every night of the week. So tons and tons of stuff coming at you. The trade deadline has passed, but we are not letting up anytime soon. You could check out Matt and a bunch of other folks over at DodgerBlue.com. Put stuff up on the website, a recap from tonight's game. Blake's got some video stuff from the clubhouse that'll be up on the Dodger Blue YouTube page as well. So if you haven't already, please subscribe, ring the notification bell. As always, we appreciate all the people, 1,800 people, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter joining us live. Thank you, and thank you so much. It's been a fun week. Tons going on. That moment where there's 2,500 people and they trade for Jack Flaherty 2 minutes before the trade deadline was an all-timer, something I'll remember a lot. So I appreciate everybody that made that moment possible. That is Matt Moreno. I am Jeff Spiegel. As always, enjoy the rest of your night, everybody. And of course, go Dodgers.